The Eidolon drifted silently through the endless void, a dark silhouette against the scattered light of distant stars. Inside, the ship's bridge was alive with soft vibrations, the low hum of power flowing through its veins like lifeblood. Officers worked in near silence, their focus sharp, their movements precise. It was another night on the edge of explored space, quiet, predictable, safe. Then the quiet shattered. Talia Vera, the young communications officer with sharp eyes and steady hands, leaned closer to her console. Strange symbols flashed across her screen, flickering like alien fireflies. Her heart skipped as she realized the source was not human. She swallowed hard and spoke softly, her voice breaking the calm. "Captain, I'm receiving a signal. It's not from any known ally." The words cut through the bridge like a blade. Kalen Dravik, standing at the center of it all, turned toward her. His weathered face was calm, but his eyes were cold steel, the eyes of a man who had seen too much war to be easily surprised. "Put it through," he said. The message emerged, filled with static and alien cadence, yet the desperation in its tone transcended language. The ship's systems worked rapidly to decode the meaning. A moment later, the translation appeared on the display. "Emergency signal. Orion Prime under attack. Our fleets are broken. Our cities are burning. Any allies help us. We are dying." The words hung in the air like a ghost. Conversation stopped. Fingers froze over controls. Even the steady hum of the bridge seemed quieter, as if the ship itself was listening. Kalen's jaw tightened. The Lumerians, beings of crystalline grace whose bodies shimmered with inner light, were not warriors. They were creators, builders, and healers. 2 decades earlier, during the Great Famine on Europa Colony, they had brought relief ships at their own expense, carrying food, medicine, and advanced technology that saved thousands of lives. They had never asked for repayment. Now they were pleading for help. Kalen felt an ache deep in his chest. Leadership was not about making easy choices. It was about carrying the unbearable weight of responsibility. He had been a soldier all his life, rising through the ranks by following orders without question. But as he stood there, he understood that this decision was different. To wait for approval from Sol Alliance Command would mean days of delay, days the Lumerians did not have. Acting now would mean taking 500 souls under his command straight into the unknown. His eyes swept over the faces of his crew. Reese Calder, his steadfast second in command, stood tall and silent, his expression unreadable. Alara Nix, the brilliant chief engineer with grease still smeared on her hands, stared at him with quiet defiance, as if daring him to be the man she believed he was. Kalen thought of his daughter back on Earth, barely old enough to join the fleet, still believing the stories that heroes always chose what was right. What would she think of him if he turned away now? The message repeated, weaker this time, as though the voice itself was fading into oblivion. There was a raw, unfiltered fear in it, fear of extinction, fear of a future stolen. Kalen understood something profound in that moment. History was not written by those who waited for permission. It was shaped by those willing to risk everything for what was right. He turned to his crew, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. "We know what the right thing to do is. Orders can wait. Morality cannot. Prepare the Eidolon for immediate departure. We're going to Orion Prime." There was no cheer, no applause, only quiet determination. The officers nodded, one by one, accepting the path they were about to walk. In the silence that followed, Kalen reflected on the strange nature of humanity. For all their flaws, the wars, the greed, the divisions, there was also something beautiful, the capacity to choose compassion over survival, courage over comfort. It was this, he realized, that made humanity worth defending in the first place. The decision was made. A single human ship was about to cross light years into a war they could not win, simply because it was the right thing to do. And in that decision, a new page of galactic history had already begun to turn. Kalen Dravik stood motionless at the center of the bridge. The dim light from the consoles reflected off his face, revealing deep lines carved by decades of service. The message still glowed on the main display, words of desperation that demanded action. For a long moment he said nothing. Silence pressed down on everyone, heavier than the void outside. The crew waited, their eyes fixed on their captain, knowing that one word from him would decide their fate. Kalen finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "Senior officers, briefing room, now." Minutes later, the ship's leaders gathered around the oval table deep inside the Eidolon. Reese Calder, his dependable first officer, stood with arms crossed, his steady presence like an anchor in turbulent waters. Ilara Nix, the fiery chief engineer, leaned forward, eyes burning with restless energy. Talia Vera, the young communications officer who had first received the signal, sat quietly, still shaken. Beside her was Dr. Mira Solon, calm and compassionate, already thinking of the wounded she might soon have to treat. Kalen looked at each of them in turn, weighing their unspoken fears. "You all know why we're here," he said. "Orion Prime is under attack. The Lumerians are dying. Command doesn't know yet, and if we wait for orders, they won't make it." Reese was the first to answer, his voice steady but cautious. "Captain, the Eidolon is powerful, but we're one ship. We don't know what we're flying into. We have 500 people on board, men and women with families waiting for them. If we gamble wrong, none of us will come back." Kalen nodded slowly. "You're right. This isn't a decision to make lightly." "Doctor," Solon spoke next, her tone quiet but resolute. "But if we do nothing, they all die, an entire people erased. The Lumerians saved our colonies before we even knew them well. They never asked what it would cost them. Now they are asking for help, and we're the only ones who can answer." Ilara slammed her hand on the table. "We can't wait. The quantum drive is ready. The weapons are primed. We've tested every system for months. This ship wasn't built to sit on the edge of space while good people burn." Kalen looked down at the table for a moment as though searching for guidance in the polished metal surface. Then he asked softly, "When has humanity been at its best?" No one spoke. The question hung in the air, heavier than any order. Finally, Reese answered, "When we helped others even when it was dangerous, when we stood up for those who couldn't defend themselves." Kalen lifted his head, his eyes clear with conviction. "Exactly. History doesn't remember those who stood by and did nothing. It remembers those who chose what was right, even when it cost them everything." He straightened, the decision now fully made. "We're not waiting for orders. Prepare the Eidolon for combat. We jump to Orion Prime immediately." There was no debate, no protest. The officers exchanged glances, each of them understanding the risk and silently accepting it. In that moment, the room felt strangely sacred. Leadership was not about power. It was about bearing the weight of choice, knowing that others would follow. Kalen looked at his crew, feeling both pride and sorrow. This isn't about winning a battle. It's about proving that doing good is never a waste. If we don't try, then who will? As they left to prepare the ship, Kalen remained for a moment longer, staring at the star charts on the wall. He thought of all the times humanity had failed to act until it was too late. Wars, atrocities, lost chances to be better. Not this time, he promised silently. With that, the fate of the Eidolon, its crew, and perhaps the entire galaxy was sealed by a single choice. One man deciding that morality mattered more than survival. The Eidolon surged forward into the unknown, its quantum drive straining as it bent the fabric of space. Stars became streaks of light outside the viewport, a silent reminder of the distance vanishing between them and Orion Prime. The hum of the ship deepened as systems shifted to combat readiness, the atmosphere on board changing from calm routine to focused urgency. Kalen Dravik walked the ship's corridors, his boots echoing softly against the metal floors. Every step carried the weight of the choice he had made. The crew members he passed looked up at him, some with fear in their eyes, others with quiet determination. He gave them a nod of reassurance, knowing they understood the truth. There was no turning back. In the engineering bay, Alara Nix moved swiftly among the humming reactors and glowing conduits. Her red hair stuck to her forehead with sweat as she recalibrated the power systems. The Eidolon's quantum drive had never been pushed this hard. One wrong calculation and the ship could be torn apart mid-jump. Yet her hands were steady. When Kalen entered, she didn't look up, still tightening a coupling with a wrench. "Drives at 120% of recommended output," she said. "We can cut the travel time to 3 days if it holds." "And if it doesn't?" Kalen asked quietly. Alara gave a small, tired smile. "Then we'll never know we were wrong." From engineering, Kalen made his way to the marine training deck. The room echoed with the sharp rhythm of weapons being checked and armor plates snapping into place. Major Orion Vance, tall and broad-shouldered, barked commands to his soldiers. These were Earth's best, trained for zero-gravity combat and alien environments. When he noticed Kalen, Vance stepped forward. "Marines are ready, Captain. Doesn't matter what we're walking into, we'll be there when it counts." Kalen nodded, meeting his gaze. "This fight isn't just about winning. It's about protecting lives that can't protect themselves. Make sure every one of your people knows that." Vance's expression softened just for a moment. "They know, sir. That's why none of them asked to leave." Further down the ship, Dr. Mira Solon prepared the med bay. She stood among crates of surgical tools and unfamiliar crystalline medical equipment, gifts once shared by the Lumerians. Holographic diagrams of Lumerian anatomy floated above the tables, their bodies like living sculptures of light and glass. Kalen watched as Mira studied their physiology. "We've never treated anyone like them before," she said, "but they helped us when we were desperate. Now it's our turn to be ready for them." As the ship pressed on through hyperspace, a strange sense of unity grew among the crew. Every officer, every soldier, every medic knew that the mission might cost them everything. Yet not a single person requested to transfer to a lifeboat. Kalen eventually returned to the bridge, standing before the viewport where the stars blurred into rivers of light. He felt the enormity of what lay ahead, but also the quiet power of a crew that believed in something greater than survival. History, he knew, would not remember their weapons or the size of their ship. It would remember whether they had chosen to act when no one else would. The Eidolon raced on, a lone spear of defiance cutting through the void, hurtling toward a world that might already be dying, but not yet forgotten. The quantum drive disengaged with a low, resonant thrum, and the Eidolon dropped back into normal space. The blur of starlight collapsed into a sky scattered with distant suns, but the beauty of the galaxy was marred by what lay ahead. Orion Prime filled the viewport, a world of shimmering crystal spires and glowing valleys that once reflected the light of its twin suns like a jewel in the dark. Now, it was scarred. Vast regions of the planet's surface were blackened, as though a spreading disease had taken root. From orbit, great wounds in the land glowed with a sickly green light, pulsing like an infection feeding on life itself. The crew fell silent, the reality of the Lumerians' plight settling over them like a heavy shroud. Kalen Dravik's chest tightened as he took in the sight. This is what happens when evil is left unchecked, he thought grimly. Around the planet, hundreds of Kryth bioships swarmed like grotesque insects, their chitinous hulls glistening with wet, organic sheen. Some were small and darted about like predatory wasps. Others were colossal monstrosities with writhing tendrils and pulsating growths, their movements disturbingly alive. These ships were not built. They had grown, breathing and shifting as if the void of space itself was their natural habitat. Amid the destruction, fragments of Lumerian vessels floated helplessly. Their crystalline hulls, once radiant and elegant, now drifted as shattered shards, catching the dim light like broken glass. "Gods," Rhys Calder muttered under his breath. "This isn't a battle, it's a slaughter." Talia Veyra's voice shook as she read signals from her console. "I'm detecting faint transmissions, survivors. They're weak, hiding on the far side of the planet's moon. They're still fighting." Kalen straightened, his voice steady. "Open a channel, get me whoever is in command." Static crackled, then a figure appeared on the main display, High Marshal Litharian. His body, once luminous with silver and blue light, was dim and fractured, as though his very essence had been scarred by the battle. Deep cracks ran along his crystalline frame, and his once strong voice now trembled with exhaustion. "Human vessel," he said, the words musical but ragged. "You came. We feared hope was lost." Kalen stepped closer to the screen, his tone firm. "We received your call. What is your status?" Litharian's dim glow flickered as he spoke. "Dire. The Kryth descended 6 days ago with more ships than we had ever seen. Our fleets, our people, fell quickly. They are feeding on our world, Captain. Every hour they grow stronger while we grow weaker. Of the hundreds of ships that defended Orion Prime, fewer than 30 remain. Most are too damaged to fight." Kalen's gaze hardened as he looked out at the monstrous swarm. The Kryth moved with an unnatural coordination, as though sharing a single mind. "Can your surviving ship still fight?" The Lumerian marshal hesitated, then nodded. "We will fight until we are nothing. But you must understand, the enemy you face does not simply kill, it consumes. Each life taken makes them more powerful." The weight of the words pressed on every soul aboard the Eidolon. This was not just war, it was predation on a galactic scale. Kalen's voice was quiet but resolute. "Then we stop them here." Litharian tilted his head, his fractured features reflecting both disbelief and gratitude. "You would risk your people for us." Kalen's reply was simple. "You saved us when we had nothing. Now we repay that debt not because we must, but because it is right." For the first time since the transmission began, Litharian's dim light brightened just slightly. "Then we will fight beside you, Captain Dravik, until the last." Kalen turned to his crew, his expression unwavering. "All stations, prepare for combat. Let the Kryth learn what happens when humanity stands for its friends." The Eidolon, a lone spear of defiance in the dark, turned toward the swarm. And somewhere deep inside, Every soul aboard understood that history would remember this day, not for victory or defeat, but for the courage to try when hope seemed lost. The Eidolon moved forward, a single blade of steel and will against a sea of living nightmares. The crew felt the ship come alive around them, reactors humming deeper, weapons charging with a rising whine, shields glowing faintly with stored energy. Every officer, every marine, every technician knew that this was not just a battle. It was a stand against extinction. Kalen Dravik's voice cut through the tense air. Target their command organisms. The swarm won't fall apart unless we take out their leaders. LT. Kale Rin, head of weapons, worked quickly, eyes scanning the tactical display. 3 primary command vessels detected, Captain. They are larger, heavily armored, and coordinating the swarm's movements. The nearest is 400,000 kilometers ahead. Then that's our target, Kalen said. Helm, bring us in fast. The Eidolon surged forward. The Kryth ships reacted immediately, smaller biofighters breaking formation and swarming like angry hornets. Their grotesque forms glistened as they darted through space, releasing spined projectiles that twisted unnaturally in the void, searching for the human ship's hull. Enemy interceptors closing fast. Corin Hale called from navigation. Open fire, Kalen ordered. The ship's new plasma lance cannons ignited, spearing through the darkness with blinding blue beams. Each shot struck with the fury of a small sun, vaporizing a fighter into shards of burnt organic matter. Railguns followed, hurling slugs at near-relativistic speed, tearing through multiple enemy ships with each impact. Direct hits, 8 kills, Rin reported, but more are coming. The Kryth ships did not break. They moved like a singular mind, their coordination unnervingly precise. Where one fell, 2 more replaced it. Some latched onto the Eidolon's shield, secreting acidic fluids that sizzled and spat against the energy barrier. Shields holding at 80%. Ilara Nix called from engineering, her hands flying over controls. But if they breach, their weapons will eat through our hull like flesh. Kalen's gaze fixed on the massive shape ahead, the first command vessel. It was unlike anything built by sentient hands, a colossal organism bristling with tendrils that twitched and writhed as though tasting the void. It radiated hunger, its grotesque form pulsating with stolen energy. Torpedoes ready? Kalen asked. Antimatter payloads charged. Rin confirmed, his voice tight. But they'll need to be fired at close range to penetrate its defenses. Kalen's expression hardened. Then we get close, all power to forward shields. The Eidolon dove through the storm of enemy fire, its plasma cannons burning paths through waves of attackers. Every impact rocked the ship, yet the crew held firm. Sparks rained from an overloaded console, but no one moved from their station. As the Dreadnought closed in, the Kryth command vessel seemed to sense its own danger. It shifted grotesquely, opening what looked like a massive organic maw, and fired a beam of dark energy that rippled like liquid night. Brace for impact, Ilara shouted. The beam slammed into the Eidolon's shields, shaking the entire ship. Lights flickered. Systems screamed warnings. Shields at 50%. Hold steady, Kalen commanded. His voice did not rise, but it carried a weight that steadied every heart on the bridge. The command vessel loomed closer, its chitinous armor glowing with stolen power, its tendrils thrashing violently as if sensing its approaching doom. Fire torpedoes, Kalen barked. 2 antimatter projectiles streaked through the darkness, brilliant points of light heading straight for the beast. The Kryth vessel twisted in a futile attempt to evade, tendrils whipping outward in desperation. A flash brighter than any star erupted as the torpedoes struck. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Then the command organism detonated from within, its body tearing apart in a storm of green fire and shattered flesh metal plating. Cheers erupted across the bridge, but Kalen didn't celebrate. His eyes stayed locked on the tactical display. Reese Calder was the first to see it. They are not retreating, they're getting more aggressive. The swarm screamed forward, enraged. Their movements no longer coordinated, but feral and desperate. The destruction of their leader had not broken them, it had only awakened their hunger. Kalen's jaw tightened. "So be it," he said coldly. "They've seen what we can do. Now we show them how far humanity will go for its friends." The Eidolon turned toward the next command vessel, pushing deeper into the storm of living weapons, its crew ready to fight until the void itself consumed them. The Eidolon plunged deeper into the heart of the swarm, its hull scarred and blackened from relentless attacks. Alarms wailed across the bridge as impacts shook the vessel. Sparks rained from shattered consoles, and the smell of burnt circuitry filled the air. Ilara Nix's voice came through the chaos, firm but strained. "Forward shields down to 30%, rerouting auxiliary power, buying us a few more minutes." "Do it," Kalen ordered. "Every second counts." The crew moved with grim efficiency, each one knowing the odds were slipping away with every passing heartbeat. On the Marine deck, Major Orion Vance checked weapons alongside his soldiers. Their combat armor gleamed dully in the emergency lights. Some of the Marines exchanged brief glances, quiet acknowledgments of what they all knew. There was a real chance they would never see home again. Vance spoke, his tone steady, almost fatherly. "We protect those who can't protect themselves. That's why we're here. No fear, no regrets, understood." A chorus of voices replied as one, "Understood." Back in engineering, Ilara worked furiously, her hands a blur as she manually redirected power conduits. The main reactor groaned under the strain. One misstep could cause a catastrophic overload, but she didn't hesitate. Her assistant, a young technician barely out of training, looked at her with wide eyes. "Chief, if we push any further, we could lose the core." Ilara paused, just long enough to meet his gaze. "Better the core than the crew. Keep working." In the med bay, Dr. Mira Solon and her team tended to the first wave of casualties. Human blood and the shimmering crystalline fluids of Lumerian allies stained the floor. Mira moved between patients with calm determination, her voice a steady anchor amid the chaos. As she treated a wounded Lumerian soldier whose body flickered like a dimming lantern, the alien reached out a fragile, glass-like hand. Its voice was soft, musical even in pain. "Why do you risk so much for us?" Mira gently clasped its hand, her eyes unwavering. "Because you once saved us when we had nothing. That's what friends do." The alien's light pulsed weakly, as if understanding. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Reese Calder monitored the tactical display. "Captain, Litharian's ships are engaging on the flank. They're taking heavy losses, but they are buying us time." Kalen's eyes hardened as he watched the crystalline vessels fight with desperate valor. For every Lumerian ship that fell, 2 more Kryth attackers turned toward the Eidolon. "Prepare another torpedo volley," Kalen ordered. Rin hesitated. "Captain, we only have 4 antimatter torpedoes left." Kalen's jaw tightened. "Then we make every shot count." The Eidolon fired again, plasma cannons and railguns roaring in unison. The sky around them was a storm of light and death. enemy ships burning, their organic hulls rupturing in grotesque bursts of green fire. But the counterattacks were brutal. A massive Kryth biocruiser slammed into the shields with a beam of corrosive energy, eating through the barrier like acid. Shields failing, Alara called out. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 8. Seal the damaged sections. Reese barked, his voice steady despite the chaos. Kalen's gaze never left the command vessel ahead. The second Kryth leader organism loomed larger, its tendrils writhing as if sensing the danger approaching. He knew the Eidolon couldn't survive another run like this, but survival was no longer the point. "Helm," Kalen said quietly, his voice like cold iron. "Take us in. One last push." No one questioned him. They all knew what it meant. As the ship accelerated, the crew felt the weight of their choice settle in. None of them had asked to die out here in the void. But every single one of them had chosen this path willingly, for honor, for friendship, for a belief that courage still mattered in a galaxy that too often forgot. And in that shared understanding, fear gave way to something stronger. Resolve. The Eidolon streaked toward the largest of the remaining Kryth command vessels, its engines roaring like a wounded beast refusing to fall. Hull plating glowed red from the strain, entire sections venting streams of vapor into space, but still the ship pressed on. Ahead loomed the monstrous bioship, a vast amalgamation of metal and flesh, bristling with twitching tendrils and grotesque growths. Pulses of green and black light rippled across its surface, as though it breathed with a hunger that could never be sated. The closer they came, the more its alien intelligence seemed to focus on them, like a predator watching its prey approach willingly. Distance to target, 100,000 kilometers. Corin Hale called out, his voice tight but steady. "Prepare the last volley of antimatter torpedoes," Kalen ordered. "LT." Kale Rin's hands moved swiftly over the weapon's console. "Torpedoes loaded, maximum yield. But Captain, at this range, detonation will destroy us too." Kalen glanced at him, eyes calm with grim resolve. "I know." The Kryth vessel shifted, its largest weapon opening like the maw of a colossal predator. Inside, a sphere of dark energy grew, swirling with the life force it had consumed from millions. The sheer malice of it radiated across space, a physical presence that made the crew's skin crawl. "Captain," Reese said softly, "if we do this, there's no turning back." Kalen looked around the bridge. His crew, battered and exhausted, met his gaze without fear. They understood. They had followed him this far, and they would follow him to the end. "All hands," Kalen said over the ship-wide intercom, his voice carrying like a final oath. "We are the line between life and oblivion. This is our stand. Anyone who wishes to leave, get to the escape pods now." No one moved. No one spoke. Reese smiled faintly, his voice low. "Looks like no one's leaving, Captain." Kalen felt a surge of pride so deep it hurt. "And we finish this together." The Kryth command ship fired first. A lance of pure darkness tore across the void, striking the Eidolon's forward shields. The barrier flared bright blue for an instant before collapsing, the beam carving through hull plating like paper. Whole decks were obliterated in a single blast. "Forward hull destroyed." Alara's voice crackled through the comms. "Main reactor at critical. We can't take another hit like that." Kalen's voice was unshaken. "Helm." Ramming speed. The Eidolon accelerated, engines screaming as though sharing the crew's defiance. The distance shrank, 70,000 kilometers, 50, 30. The Kryth ship's tendrils writhed violently, attempting to intercept the oncoming Dreadnought, but the Eidolon weaved through the chaos, a wounded predator lunging for the kill. "Fire all remaining torpedoes," Kalen commanded. 4 brilliant points of light streaked into the darkness, closing the gap with impossible speed. The Kryth ship thrashed as if sensing its doom, its organic armor shifting frantically, but it was too late. The torpedoes struck home. For a fraction of a second, the universe was silent. Then the command vessel erupted from within, tearing itself apart in a violent cascade of green fire and shredded biometal. The Eidolon, its engines still burning bright, plunged directly into the dying beast, vanishing in a blinding inferno that outshone the twin suns of Orion Prime. Every soul aboard had known this was the cost, and still, none of them had turned away. Far above the burning world, in that single moment of sacrifice, humanity proved that true strength was not in power, but in the courage to give everything for what was right. The explosion lit up the void like a newborn star, casting long shadows across the shattered fleets and the scarred face of Orion Prime. Shards of the Eidolon's hull spun silently amid the wreckage of the Kryth command vessel, fragments of steel drifting beside the grotesque remains of alien flesh metal. For a moment, there was only silence. Then slowly, the battle shifted. Leaderless, the Kryth swarm faltered. Their once perfect coordination collapsed into chaos, ships ramming into each other or fleeing blindly into the darkness. The smaller biofighters scattered like startled insects, some drifting without direction, others retreating in a frenzy of instinctive survival. Reese Calder, blood running down his forehead, managed to push himself up from where he had been thrown against the bulkhead. The bridge was in ruins, consoles shattered and sparking, the air heavy with smoke and the acrid stench of burnt circuits. "Report!" Kalen's voice was hoarse, barely audible over the failing hum of emergency power. Ilara Nix's voice came through the comms, weak but steady. "Captain, we're in 3 pieces. Main reactor is gone. Life support is failing." Kalen looked around. Many of the crew were injured, some lying motionless. He could see Talia Vera, her arm twisted unnaturally but her eyes still open, working her console with her remaining hand to send out distress signals. The intercom crackled with Dr. Mira Solin's voice. "I've set up a triage area in what's left of Cargo Bay 2. We have dozens wounded and 12 confirmed dead." Kalen closed his eyes for a brief moment. Each number felt like a blade. These were not just crew members, they were people with families, dreams, and lives that would never continue past this day. "Talia," he said softly, "can you reach High Marshal Litharian?" She hesitated, then nodded, pain etched on her face. "Signal weak, but I'll try." Static filled the air before the image of Litharian appeared on the fractured display. His crystalline body was cracked, and his once bright light was a faint glow, but his voice carried strength. "Captain Dravik," he said, the musical tone of his speech tinged with sorrow and awe. "You survived. We feared you were lost." Kalen managed a faint, tired smile. "Barely. What's your status?" Litharian's gaze lowered. "Of the hundreds of ships that defended Orion Prime, only 8 remain operational, but the Kryth are in disarray. They are retreating. You have given us hope when there was none." Kalen's eyes burned with the weight of both victory and loss. "We didn't do it for hope. We did it because it was right." Litharian bowed his fractured head. 12 of your people gave their lives so that billions of mine might live. Their sacrifice will be honored for as long as my people draw breath. From this day, Every Lumerian child will know their names. Around them, Lumerian rescue ships began to emerge from behind the moon, their crystalline hulls glowing softly as they moved toward the broken remnants of the Eidolon. They extended bridges of light and energy, carefully latching onto the drifting sections of the human Dreadnought. Alara's voice came again, faint with exhaustion. "Captain, rescue ships are locking on. We're going to make it." Kalen looked at the shattered bridge, at his injured crew refusing to give up, at the sight of alien allies risking themselves to save them. Victory had come, but at a cost that could never truly be repaid. He whispered quietly, almost to himself, "History won't remember our ship, but it will remember why we chose to fight." And for the first time since the battle began, Kalen let out a slow breath, not of relief but of acceptance. In the days that followed, the wreckage of the Eidolon drifted in silent orbit above Orion Prime, a monument to sacrifice. Lumerian engineers worked tirelessly alongside the surviving human crew, creating makeshift life support systems to keep the wounded alive until a rescue fleet could arrive. News of the battle spread faster than anyone expected. The Sol Alliance, still reeling from the initial reports, was stunned to learn that one ship had faced down an entire Kryth invasion, and prevailed, though at terrible cost. Across the galaxy, species that had once lived in fear whispered a single truth: the Kryth could be defeated. High Marshal Litharian summoned Kalen Dravik to what remained of Orion Prime's once glorious capital. The crystalline towers that had sparkled like frozen sunlight were now jagged ruins, and the air shimmered with the faint hum of reconstruction drones. Yet amidst the devastation, the Lumerians carried themselves with quiet dignity, their fractured bodies still glowing faintly as they worked to rebuild. Litharian met Kalen in the ruins of their great council hall, its shattered crystal ceiling open to the twin suns above. Despite his own damage, the marshal stood tall, his voice filled with gratitude. "Captain Dravik," he said, "your ship is gone, and many of your people are dead. Yet you gave us something no weapon could provide, proof that evil can be faced and hope can survive." Kalen bowed his head slightly. "We did what we believed was right, that's all." "No," Litharian replied, his dim light flickering with emotion. "You did what others feared to do, and because of that the galaxy is already changing." He gestured to a gathering of envoys, representatives from species Kalen had never met: the winged aeroliths, the towering Farron, the amphibious cauldron. They had all come to witness what would happen next. "The destruction of 2 Kryth command vessels has awakened courage across the stars," Litharian continued. "Civilizations that once hid in the shadows now see that unity can triumph where fear has failed. The Council has voted to create a Galactic Defense Accord, a force to stand together against the Kryth and any who would prey on the weak. And humanity, because of you, will light it." Kalen felt the weight of the words settle on him. He thought of his fallen crew, those who would never return home, who had paid for this moment with their lives. This is their legacy, he realized. Not just victory, but the promise of a future where compassion mattered as much as strength. One by one, the envoys stepped forward, pledging their people to the new alliance. Some offered fleets, others technology, others soldiers. But more important than resources was what their presence symbolized: a galaxy choosing to fight together rather than cower apart. Kalen looked up at the fractured sky of Orion Prime, feeling both pride and sorrow. This victory was not the end of the war. It was only the beginning. but it had lit a fire that could no longer be extinguished. The Kryth would return. Darkness always did, but now the galaxy would not face that darkness alone. 6 months later, the shipyards orbiting Earth gleamed like a crown of light above the blue world. Towering construction scaffolds encased the frame of a colossal vessel, the Aegis Nova, the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. Its armor shone with alloy plating forged from both human and Lumerian technology, and its weapons were designed not just for destruction, but for defense, built with the lessons of sacrifice carved into every bulkhead. On the day of its launch, crowds filled the viewing platforms on Earth and across Sol Alliance colonies. Families of the fallen from the Eidolon stood side by side with alien dignitaries, their differences set aside in honor of what had been achieved together. Captain Kalen Dravik, fully recovered from his injuries, walked the new ship's corridors with a quiet reverence. The Aegis Nova felt different from any ship he had ever commanded. The walls bore memorial plaques engraved with the names of those who had died at Orion Prime, human and Lumerian alike. Every crew member who passed by seemed to straighten when they looked at those names, as if reminded of the price paid for the chance to stand here now. On the bridge, Reese Calder, his once steely demeanor now softened by hard-won wisdom, stood at Kalen's side as first officer. Ilara Nix, chief engineer once again, monitored the power systems with pride. Dr. Mira Solon prepared medbays enhanced with Lumerian healing crystals, and Talia Vera, her injured arm fully healed by alien technology, returned to her post at communications. "All stations report ready, Captain," Reese said, a faint smile touching his scarred face. Kalen took his seat in the new command chair, feeling its weight not of power but of responsibility. "Helm," he said quietly, "set course for the Vega Rim colonies. There have been reports of Kryth activity there." "Aye, Captain," course plotted. Kalen looked out at the stars beyond the viewport. They seemed unchanged, cold, endless, indifferent, yet something had changed. For the first time the galaxy had begun to unite, not out of fear but out of hope. He thought of the crew of the Eidolon, of the lives lost, and of what their sacrifice had built. They had proven that courage mattered, that compassion was worth dying for, and that standing for what was right could reshape the future of entire worlds. "Take us out," Kalen ordered. With a deep, resonant hum, the Aegis Nova leapt into hyperspace, leaving Earth behind as it carried its diverse crew, human, Lumerian, and members of other allied species, toward the next frontier. Far below, on Orion Prime, children played among rebuilt crystal spires, their laughter ringing like music. They grew up hearing the story of a ship that had crossed the void not for conquest, but for friendship and justice. The galaxy remained a dangerous place, full of predators and tyrants waiting for the chance to rise again. But now they would face a united force, led by those who had already proven they would give everything to protect the innocent. And somewhere in the cold darkness of space, the Kryth watched, and for the first time they knew fear.